Well, the president going against the recommendation of the JSC and some analysts praising him for that decision. This comes, of course, on the back as well of the dealings this week with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, yesterday in possible mediation talks. But Ramaphosa is also facing a motion of no confidence. Again, two of them, which are said to be in Parliament at the end of this month. There's a lot to talk about here, and I'm very pleased to say I'm joined now by my fellow eNCA, Thulasizwe Simelane, who's watching some of these developments, and we can share some observations together. Makuchwa, good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, President.
It's so good to have you on the other side.
I'm not wearing a tie.
You're not wearing a tie. And you're not reading the intro.
No. Let that be your task.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you sort of overheard part of the responses that Dalimpofu was giving. He does not... He thinks the JSC, in his view, did not err, if you want to use that word.
Yeah.
They had to make some recommendation. He said, if two candidates are interviewed for a job, you give an opinion about who's the best person, which is what they did in this case.
You don't just hug and walk away.
Yeah, but they understood that it's up to the president finally, that you can't say no. Once the president can decide, you can say whatever, but it's up to the president. What's your reflection on that?
I'm critical of them having made that recommendation, Braden, because for starters, I'm critical of the path and the route that the president took. On paper, it looks good in terms of broadening the consultation around processes that are entrusted in him as head of the executive in terms of the constitution. But in practice, we saw what happened with those interviews that I believe that, are not prescribed, that there should be interviews. All that's necessary is for him to consult the JSC and leaders of parties represented in Parliament. Consult. And even if there's going to be an interview, because the precedent has been set with Mogoeng, I doubt that they were meant to then come out with a recommendation. In fact, the president himself went on to say a few days after they had concluded that, well, they went a step further and made a recommendation. And as we've seen, he didn't follow that recommendation.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, you mentioned the name Mogoeng. Mogoeng was such a charismatic Chief Justice, present and stuff, and sometimes just bigger than everything.
Yeah.
Maybe because of that, there was so much attention on that office, maybe the president thought, let me open this up to all South Africans for the first time.
The only thing is that in practice, it exposed senior members of the judiciary to all sorts of, conduct that would rather have not seen. I mean, think about the JP Mlambo interview and the allegations that came out, untested, not founded on any substantive allegation being made, and you just wonder whether there could have been a different way.
Yeah, Dalit Tambo was saying that they had agreed with the acting Chief Justice last year that when the new Chief Justice is in place, there's going to be a workshop about how to conduct themselves better. Yeah. Hopefully, as I said, there are lessons from this, and maybe they will fix that. So, but the president is like putting his stamp then on this one, because he just said, there's your recommendation, but I'm the man in charge here. I want Zondo in the Chief Justice office.
In fact, Braden, in my reading, yesterday was a day of mixed fortunes for the Ramaphosa presidency. But on a balance, it was a good day for the Ramaphosa presidency.
Tell us?
In that this is a presidency that has been pummeled for all sorts of issues.
Especially recently.
Recently, including that panel of experts report that came out, how they dropped the ball in as far as the security response is concerned.
For the July riots.
Yes, the July riots one, including Ramaphosa himself. He's been under pressure, and the administration has been under pressure, criticized for mixed messages in as far as Ukraine and Russia is concerned. And then yesterday, in the face of these motions of no confidence, one in him and one in the cabinet, one is Section 1021, which is what the DA is going for, the cabinet without him, and the other is 102.2, which is about him. That's the ATM motion.
Which has been pending for some time.
For 2 years. In the face of all of that, he asserts himself. He knows that his appointment of Raymond Zondo will not be welcomed by everyone. And there was never really a right answer to this anyway. Some people are always going to be unhappy, and he had a good choice out of the four. He could have been eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and chosen any of the four. And he makes his choice, and he boldly says, despite the limitation of just 2.5 years to serve, I'm going to go with Raymond Zondo, asserting himself against his critics that had hoped
and
to
apparently
honor him.
he used the argument of continuity as well,
Absolutely.
very well. I think that's what he must have used to convince some of the parties.
His critics would have hoped that they would, the JSC recommendation would have cornered him or in a way blackmailed him to say, you just have one way to go and no other way to go. But he asserts himself. So that's a plus for him. But at the same time, the critics on foreign policy, he then moves on to silence them in saying that, actually, you've been criticizing me and saying that we're sort of not doing anything on Russia.
Yeah, we're standing on the fence
sitting.
We're not clear.
Well, guess what? I've been in conversation with Vladimir Putin, who's busy executing a war, but took my call, and I'm grateful that he took my call. We spoke at length. I outlined our position. He doesn't reveal to us what that position is, but goes on further to say, we've been asked to play a mediation role. In a way, that says what we've been arguing for all along, that this conflict must be resolved through mediation. Condemnation and taking sides doesn't take us anywhere, is exactly what is transpiring, in that we're being asked to do that. He doesn't attribute, interestingly, to Russian President Vladimir Putin this request for South Africa to play a role in mediation. But it's interesting that it is placed in the same context that sums up the content of their meeting. So a day of mixed fortunes, I suppose, those two leaning in favor.
Yeah, I mean, it makes him look good in that sense that, we didn't just...
Yeah.
Because I'm told if you look at the United Nations resolution in which South Africa abstained, it doesn't really go strong on the need for mediation or dialogue or negotiations. I mean, how else do you end a war? You have to sit across the table and talk and negotiate a deal and cease fire. So, but let's come back then to the home one, the domestic politics of the motion of no confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, although the ATM one is 2 years old, it is a motion of no confidence. The DA saying we have no confidence in this executive as well. And they're going to be playing themselves out on the same day in the House. I mean, it's the first time I've heard of two motions of no confidence in the leadership of the country at the same time.
So as I said, Braden, there are separate motions of no confidence in terms of two different subsections of the Constitution, 102.1 and 102.2. One is in the President and the other is in the Cabinet. So the one says if the National Assembly, by a majority, passes a motion of no confidence in the Cabinet, the President must reconstitute his Cabinet. That's what the DA wants. And we can go through the reasons why they are saying that. But the other one says if the National Assembly, through a motion of no confidence supported by a majority of its members, passes a motion of no confidence in the President, then the President and the Cabinet must then resign. This, for me, I say, Braden, it's actually good for our democracy that he should face a motion of no confidence. And this is no commentary on his performance or otherwise. This comes from the Mazibuko judgment in 2013, where there was confusion about whether the Speaker had the power and the authority to schedule a motion of no confidence if the scheduling committee was gridlocked and deadlocked and not able to move forward on whether or not to schedule one. There, the Constitutional Court was emphatic that actually this is good for what they called our democratic hygiene in terms of accountability, which is a value. We place high premium on accountability. Cyril Ramaphosa is a president in a constitutional democracy. His office is a constitutional creation. He is not a king. He is not an emperor. He is appointed in terms of our constitutions. And from time to time, the question must be posed. It can't be sacrilege to ask the question, are you still fit and proper to continue to be our president? It's part of those conversations that I think, of course, the motion itself probably stands no chance of being passed. Former President Jacob Zuma, by the way, faced at least 8 of those motions of no confidence, which then became routine. The ATM is unhappy, though, Braden, that it will all happen by open voting as opposed to by secret ballot, which comes from the UDM judgment, which said that when the environment is toxic, where members of parliament cannot be true to the Constitution without fearing repercussions in terms of the party politics playing itself out, then, the Speaker and the National Assembly is well within their rights to decide that this should be conducted by secret ballot. And Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula telling us that the environment is not toxic at the moment and therefore there's no need for a secret ballot.
Thank you very much, Thulasizwe Simelane, for sharing some of your insights and views as we observe this week that was. I think it's a tick in terms of a good week politically, in terms of performance and otherwise, both domestically and especially with the judiciary and with the foreign policy issue of Russia and Ukraine. That's Thulasizwe Simelane.